Dr. Vexthor adjusted his ceremonial research goggles and gazed down at the primitive blue planet spinning lazily below their cloaked vessel. After 17 cycles of studying the galaxy's most boring civilizations, the Galactic Research Council had finally approved his proposal for something interesting: humans, and the mysterious species that half the galaxy whispered about in hushed tones, usually followed by nervous laughter and the phrase, "Thank the void they haven't figured out faster than light travel yet." "Quantum, initiate the scanning protocols," Vexthor commanded, his 3 arms gesturing dramatically at the holographic displays. His assistant, a nervous creature whose species had evolved from what could only be described as anxious jellyfish, bobbed uncertainly near the control panel. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Dr. Vexthor? The Council xenobiology reports on humans are rather disturbing. Apparently, they voluntarily consume poison for entertainment, engage in recreational combat for fun, and some of them actually choose to jump out of perfectly functional aircraft." Vexthor waved dismissively. "Quantum, my dear colleague, those are obviously exaggerated tales meant to keep inferior species away from a valuable research opportunity. Observe." He pointed to their target zone with scientific smugness. "I've selected the perfect specimen. Look at this one." The scanner focused on a figure hunched over what appeared to be a primitive food consumption station. The human was methodically consuming something that the ship's analysis computers were having an existential crisis trying to categorize. It seemed to be melted dairy product mixed with vegetable matter, artificial coloring agents, and what the database reluctantly labeled as cheese-adjacent substances of unknown origin. "Behold, the ideal research subject," Vexthor announced proudly. "This human designated Jake Martinez, age 28, occupation listed as Information Technology Support Specialist, night shift. Notice how docile and predictable he appears. He's following the same routine every evening for the past 3 months. Food consumption, then approximately 8 hours of staring at glowing rectangles, while other humans complain to him through primitive communication devices." Quantum's tentacles twitched nervously. "But sir, what if the stories are true? What if humans are actually dangerous?" Vexthor laughed, a sound like wind chimes having an argument. "My dear Quantum, look at him. He's consuming what can only be described as liquid cheese from a container labeled Nacho Explosion Supreme. And judging by his body language, this is the highlight of his day. How threatening could he possibly be?" Jake Martinez, blissfully unaware that he was being observed by creatures whose entire understanding of his species came from statistical analysis and wild rumors, scraped the last bit of processed cheese product from the bottom of his container and sighed contentedly. It had been a good day. Only 3 printers had achieved sentience and tried to escape. The coffee machine hadn't exploded, and he'd successfully convinced his manager that turning the server room into a winter wonderland theme was essential for optimal cooling efficiency. Above him, the research vessel's tractor beam hummed to life. "Initiate specimen acquisition," Vexthor ordered, practically vibrating with scientific excitement. "Tomorrow the Galactic Research Council will finally have comprehensive data on human biology, psychology, and behavioral patterns. I'll be the most celebrated xenobiologist in 17 star systems." As Jake found himself surrounded by a shimmering blue light, his last coherent thought before unconsciousness was that this was either the best or worst acid flashback he'd never actually taken the drugs to earn. The research team congratulated themselves on their flawlessly executed abduction as their ship turned toward the laboratory facility. None of them noticed that Jake's pocket was still emitting the faint sounds of his phone, which had automatically connected to a conference call with Earth's most persistent customer service issue, Mrs. Henderson from accounting, who had been trying to print a single PDF for the past 6 hours and was absolutely not giving up now. Jake Martinez regained consciousness in what could only be described as the galaxy's most expensive dentist office. White walls, uncomfortably bright lighting, and that distinctive smell of industrial-grade disinfectant mixed with barely contained scientific panic. He sat up slowly, rubbing his head, and found himself face to face with what appeared to be a 7-foot-tall purple octopus wearing safety goggles and a lab coat. "Greetings, human specimen," Dr. Vexthor announced formally, activating his universal translator with what he assumed was an appropriately intimidating gesture. "Do not be afraid. You have been selected for the honor of contributing to galactic scientific knowledge." Jake blinked twice, looked around the sterile laboratory, then back at Vexthor. "Okay, first of all, love the commitment to the bit. The costume work is genuinely impressive. But seriously, what's the budget on this student film? Because I've got to tell you, the set design screams we spent all our money on the alien suit and had $50 left for everything else." Dr. Vexthor's 3 arms froze mid-gesture. This was not in any of the behavioral prediction models. Quantum, hovering nervously behind a force field, consulted his notes frantically. Excuse me? Vexthor stammered. No, don't get me wrong, Jake continued, standing up and examining the examination table with professional interest. The sterile sci-fi aesthetic is classic, but you've got some real functionality issues here. This restraint system? Completely impractical. One good wiggle and Jake demonstrated by casually slipping out of the energy restraints that had taken the ship's engineers 3 cycles to perfect. That's impossible, Quantum whispered, his translucent form turning a deeper shade of alarmed orange. Also, and I don't want to be that guy, but your ventilation system is making a noise that suggests the intake filter hasn't been cleaned in, what's your equivalent of months, because that's a health code violation waiting to happen. Jake walked over to an air vent and, with the confident expertise of someone who dealt with office building infrastructure for years, started pointing out design flaws. Dr. Vextor felt something he'd never experienced before: professional inadequacy. Human, you will remain still while we conduct our research protocols. We are advanced beings from the Galactic Research Council, and you are merely a primitive specimen for study. Jake paused his impromptu facility inspection and turned back to the aliens with the patient expression he usually reserved for users who insisted they hadn't accidentally deleted their entire hard drive while just clicking around. Right, okay, I'm getting the whole advanced alien civilization vibe you're going for, but can we talk about this lighting situation? Because whoever designed your illumination system clearly never considered the psychological impact of harsh fluorescent equivalents on both subjects and researchers. You're creating unnecessary stress hormones that are going to skew your data. He pointed to the ceiling fixtures with the authority of someone who'd spent countless nights in poorly lit server rooms. Also, Jake continued, now fully in troubleshooting mode, I can hear your ship's computer system from here. And buddy, you've got some serious optimization issues. That processing lag suggests your data management protocols haven't been updated since, well, I'm guessing your equivalent of Windows 95. Quantum dropped his clipboard. Dr. Vexthor's ceremonial research goggles began fogging up, with what could only be described as existential confusion. Furthermore, Jake said, warming to his subject, if you're trying to study human behavior, you might want to invest in some basic hospitality infrastructure. A decent coffee machine, maybe some comfortable seating, Wi-Fi that doesn't make me want to file a complaint with the Intergalactic Better Business Bureau. He paused, pulling out his still-functioning phone. Oh, and speaking of which, Mrs. Henderson from accounting is still on hold. Do you mind if I take this? She's been trying to print the same PDF for 6 hours, and honestly, that's the kind of dedication that deserves respect. 24 hours later, Dr. Vextor stood in his laboratory, watching his carefully planned research project spiral into what could only be described as controlled chaos, with emphasis on the chaos part. Jake Martinez had somehow transformed from a simple research specimen into what the ship's computer kept categorizing as a systemic improvement consultant, and frankly, it was becoming a problem. Report? Vextor demanded wearily, addressing the morning briefing that had become an unfortunate necessity since the humans' arrival. Lieutenant Nexus, the ship's chief engineer, consulted his datapad with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had been gently but thoroughly demolished. Well, sir, the human fixed our coffee synthesizer. Seems fair? Positive? Heem used the leftover nacho cheese from his abduction meal and some kind of fibrous material from his clothing pocket. The result is somehow superior to our original design specifications. The entire engineering crew has developed what the human calls caffeine dependency, and productivity has increased by 400%. Dr. Vextor felt a familiar headache forming behind his ceremonial research goggles. And the filing system incident? Quantum bobbed nervously, his translucent form flickering with embarrassment. The human said our data organization was criminally inefficient and offered to help. We thought it would keep him occupied while we ran diagnostics. Instead, he reorganized 17 years of classified research data in 3 hours and accidentally discovered that our government has been lying about the actual location of the Galactic Center for tax purposes. The poker situation? Ongoing, sir. The human introduced a recreational gambling activity that involves statistical analysis and psychological manipulation. Half the crew has wagered their annual food allowances, and somehow the human now owns a 43% stake in our propulsion system. Vexthor slumped into his ergonomically questionable research chair. Through the laboratory's viewing port, he could see Jake in the ship's recreational facility, demonstrating what appeared to be interpretive dance to a group of fascinated xenobiology technicians. According to the reports, this was actually a team-building exercise designed to improve interdepartmental communication. Sir, Nexus continued hesitantly, there's also the matter of the ship's artificial intelligence. What about the AI? The human convinced it to start what he calls a comedy podcast. They're currently broadcasting something called Two Guys, One Ship and Existential Dread to the entire galactic research network. Episode 12 dropped this morning, and apparently we have subscribers. As if summoned by their conversation, the ship's intercom crackled to life with Jake's voice, now apparently co-hosting the morning announcements. Good morning, passengers and crew of the RSS Scientific Endeavor. This is your temporary human consultant, Jake, reminding everyone that today's lunch special features what I'm told is nutrition paste, but what I prefer to call mystery protein surprise. Also, maintenance reminder, whoever keeps leaving dirty dishes in the break room sink, your mom doesn't work here, and neither do I. But I will find you, and I will leave passive-aggressive sticky notes on your workstation. The crew actually responds to these announcements, Quantum whispered in amazement. The leaving incidents have decreased by 97%. Dr. Vexthor stood up abruptly, his three arms gesturing in what his species considered an expression of deep scientific frustration. This was supposed to be a simple observation study. We beam up one human, we run some tests, we publish our findings, and we get promoted to the Advanced Civilizations Research Division. Instead, we have a worry skull. He struggled to find words in any of the 17 languages he spoke fluently. A consultant? Nexus offered helpfully. Our specimen has somehow convinced the navigation system to place something called 99 bottles of beer on the wall during every hyperspace jump, which will apparently take 14 hours to complete. The crew is either developing nervous disorders or joining in with the singing. There appears to be no middle ground. Through the intercom, Jake's voice continued cheerfully. Oh, and Dr. Vexthor, if you're listening to this, Mrs. Henderson from accounting finally got her PDF to print. Turns out the issue was a driver compatibility problem with your quantum resonance printer interface. I've uploaded the fix to your main computer system. You're welcome. Also, she says thank you and wants to know if you accept Earth currency because she'd like to tip you for excellent customer service. Quantum's tentacles drooped with what might have been resignation or admiration. Sir, perhaps we should consider the possibility that our research parameters were fundamentally flawed. How so? Well, we assumed humans were dangerous because they were aggressive or primitive. We never considered they might be dangerous because they're... Quantum paused, searching for the right scientific terminology. Helpful, Dr. Vexthor finished weakly. Aggressively helpful, Quantum corrected, and apparently unstoppably so. 3 sectors away, in the gleaming bureaucratic nightmare that was Galactic Council headquarters, Director Zephlin was having what her species diplomatically referred to as a career-ending mental breakdown. The morning briefing reports from the RSS Scientific Endeavor had started normally enough. Day 1. Human specimen successfully acquired, beginning observation protocols. Day 2. Minor complications with specimen containment, adjusting research parameters. Day 3. Human has somehow improved ship efficiency by 30%, requesting guidance. By day 7, the reports had devolved into what could only be described as desperate pleas for help disguised as scientific updates. Read it again, Zephlin commanded, her 4 eyes focusing with the intensity of someone whose entire understanding of galactic order was crumbling in real time. Her aide, a nervous creature whose species had evolved from what appeared to be perpetually anxious filing cabinets, cleared his throat and began reading from the latest transmission. Day 7 update from RSS Scientific Endeavor. Human specimen Jake Martinez has successfully negotiated a peace treaty between the culinary department and the janitorial staff, ending a 40-cycle dispute over proper food waste disposal protocols. Additionally, he has reorganized our entire research database using something he calls common sense, which our computer systems are having difficulty processing as a valid organizational parameter. Zephlin's head tentacles twitched ominously. Continue. The human has also established what he terms a suggestion box for crew complaints, and has personally addressed 93% of submitted issues within standard work cycles. Morale is at unprecedented levels. We are requesting immediate extraction, or, alternatively, permission to promote the human to Assistant Department, Head of General Problem Resolution. General Problem Resolution. The aide paused, consulting his notes with growing alarm. There's more, Director. Yesterday's report mentions that the human has convinced the ship's navigation AI to optimize their route planning using something called traffic apps, and has reduced standard travel time between sectors by 22%. The economic implications alone... Director Zephlin stood abruptly, her ceremonial robes of office rustling with bureaucratic authority. Summon the emergency council. We have a code red situation. 2 hours later, the most powerful beings in 17 star systems sat around a conference table that had been hastily assembled using emergency protocols not activated since the Great Taxation Revolt of 2387. The holographic display showed the RSS Scientific Endeavor, which appeared to be operating with suspicious efficiency. Council members, Zephlin began, her voice carrying the weight of galactic authority and barely contained panic. We are facing an unprecedented threat to the established order of civilized space. Councillor Threxmond, a being whose species had evolved from what could generously be described as sentient red tape, gestured dismissively with his 17 administrative appendages. Director, surely you're overreacting. One human specimen cannot possibly— The human has fixed their coffee machine, Zephyline interrupted, her voice rising to what her species considered a diplomatic shout. Their crew productivity has increased by 400%. Do you understand what this means for established galactic labor standards? An uncomfortable silence settled over the council chamber. Councillor Vexnea, whose people had built their entire civilization on the principle of acceptable mediocrity, spoke carefully. Perhaps the reports are exaggerated. Surely no single being could— The humans started a comedy podcast with their ship's artificial intelligence, Zephyline continued relentlessly. It has 17 million subscribers across 43 star systems. Our own crew members are requesting permission to appear as guest commentators. The economic and cultural ramifications are staggering. The council exchanged nervous glances. Comedy was strictly regulated throughout civilized space, as it had been scientifically proven to lead to dangerous levels of independent thinking and job satisfaction. Furthermore, the director pressed on, the human has convinced their crew to implement something called Casual Fridays, which has somehow improved interdepartmental cooperation to levels our sociologics previously thought impossible. If this spreads to other research vessels. Councillor Zix-Marie, whose species had spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of productive misery, began to hyperventilate through his 7 breathing apertures. Director, are you suggesting this human might actually make work enjoyable? I'm suggesting this human has weaponized competence, Zephlin declared, activating the holographic display with a gesture that brooked no argument. Look at these efficiency reports. Look at these crew satisfaction metrics. This creature is systematically dismantling everything we understand about proper workplace dysfunction. The display showed graph after graph of improvements. Communication efficiency up 200%. Equipment malfunctions down 78%. Interdepartmental complaints reduced to 0. And most terrifyingly, something labeled voluntary overtime hours had appeared in the database for the first time in recorded galactic history. My fellow counselors, Zephyline concluded, her voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. This human is not just a research specimen. It's a systemic optimization engine that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and apparently cannot be contained without voluntarily improving its containment facilities. If we don't act immediately, we risk the complete transformation of galactic civilization as we know it. Councillor Threxmond's administrative appendages were trembling as he processed the implications. Director, what do you recommend? I'm declaring operation. Damage control. We send a military fleet to extract this human before it can spread its influence any further, and I'm classifying all humans as a Level 9 containment risk, pending further study. Level 9? Vexnea gasped. But that's reserved for species capable of accidentally ending civilizations. Exactly, Zephyslin replied grimly. Because at this rate, by the time this human gets back to Earth, every workplace in the galaxy is going to expect proper coffee, reasonable management, and job satisfaction. The economic and social chaos would be unprecedented. As if summoned by their fears, the council chamber's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from the RSS Scientific Endeavor. Jake's cheerful voice filled the room. Hey there, Galactic Council folks. Jake Martinez here, temporary consultant aboard the good ship Scientific Endeavor. I just wanted to reach out because I noticed some inefficiencies in your standard operating procedures that I thought I could help you guys optimize. Nothing major, just some basic workflow improvements that could probably save you about 40% on administrative overhead. Give me a call back when you get a chance. Oh, and tell Director Zephlin that her staff scheduling algorithm has a recursive loop bug that's been causing unnecessary overtime expenses for like 17 years apparently. I've got a fix ready to go whenever you want it. The transmission ended with Jake's characteristic helpfulness, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy staring at each other in stunned silence. Level 10, Zephyline whispered. Upgrade the human to level 10, containment risk. But, Director, Threximon protested weakly, level 10 is theoretical, we've never actually had to. We do now. 6 months later, Jake Martinez was living what could only be described as the most surreal chapter of human history. And that was saying something considering humans had once convinced themselves that pet rocks were a viable investment strategy. His modest two-bedroom apartment in Denver had become the unofficial embassy for what the State Department was diplomatically calling displaced galactic persons seeking temporary humanitarian assistance, but which Jake privately referred to as my alien roommates who can't figure out how to work the coffee machine. Dr. Vextor emerged from the basement, which had been converted into a makeshift research facility using equipment that technically belonged to 17 different galactic governments, but which the aliens insisted they had requisitioned for ongoing cultural exchange purposes. In reality, they'd stolen it while fleeing their own civilization, but Jake had learned that diplomatic language was important when filing paperwork with both the U.S. Immigration Department and the newly formed Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Jake, Dr. Vextor announced, his three arms juggling what appeared to be official documents printed on paper that shimmered with bureaucratic authority. Our asylum applications have been approved by your Earth authorities. We are now officially recognized as political refugees, fleeing persecution for excessive exposure to human logic and humor, with a secondary classification of occupational hazard victims. Jake looked up from his laptop, where he was simultaneously managing 3 different consulting contracts, moderating the most popular intergalactic podcast in known space, and responding to what had become a daily flood of emails from various Earth governments asking for his expert consultation on extraterrestrial workplace efficiency standards. The whole alien invasion thing had turned out to be fantastic for his resume. That's great, Doc. How's Quantum adjusting to Earth life? As if summoned by his name, Quantum materialized from the kitchen, his translucent form flickering with what Jake had learned to recognize as contentment mixed with existential confusion. Jake, I have successfully prepared what humans call breakfast, though I must confess your species' relationship with nutrition continues to baffle me. You have created a meal category that consists entirely of foods shaped like circles, served with liquid sugar, and consumed specifically during the early portion of your day cycle. Pancakes are a sacred human tradition, Quantum. Don't overthink it. I have also been monitoring the galactic communication networks, Quantum continued, hovering nervously near Jake's workspace. The Galactic Council has officially classified humans as a diplomatic impossibility, and has established what they are calling the human containment zone around your entire solar system. Jake grinned, pausing in his work to grab another cup of coffee from the machine that Quantum had somehow improved to the point where it could brew drinks that technically didn't exist yet. How's that working out for them? Dr. Vextor's ceremonial research goggles, now decorated with what appeared to be Earth-made stickers reading, World's Okayest Scientists and I Survived Human Optimization, reflected his amusement. Not well. Your species has apparently interpreted the containment zone as a challenge. Earth's governments have established what they're calling the Galactic Consultation Bureau, and are actively recruiting humans to serve as cultural efficiency ambassadors to other civilizations. Also, Quantum added, with what might have been pride, your internet has somehow breached their communication firewalls, and alien civilizations throughout 17 star systems are now experiencing what they're calling cultural contamination through something called memes and TikTok challenges. Jake's phone buzzed with another notification from the app he'd developed called Alien Consult, which had become the galaxy's most downloaded workplace improvement platform. According to the metrics, he now had over 40 million subscribers across 63 different species, all desperately seeking advice on everything from office coffee quality to optimal meeting scheduling. The Regelian Trade Federation has requested a formal consultation on improving their customer service protocols, Dr. Vextor reported, reading from his official-looking documents. Apparently, their client satisfaction ratings have been abysmal for 3 centuries, and they're willing to pay 17 billion credits for what they're calling the Jake Martinez experience. And the Centauri Corporate Collective wants you to analyze their supply chain management, Quantum added enthusiastically. They've offered to name a moon after you in exchange for what they're calling just 15 minutes of your time to discuss optimization opportunities. Jake leaned back in his chair, surveying his apartment that had somehow become the nerve center for humanity's accidental conquest of galactic inefficiency. The basement hummed with alien technology that was apparently revolutionizing Earth's understanding of physics. His kitchen had been upgraded with appliances that could synthesize matter at the molecular level, and his living room had become a regular filming location for what was now the most popular talk show in known space, Coffee with Jake, Intergalactic Edition. You know what the funny thing is? Jake mused, taking a sip of his impossible coffee while scrolling through consultation requests from civilizations whose names he couldn't pronounce. I never actually wanted to be an intergalactic efficiency consultant. I just wanted to fix people's printer problems, and maybe get through a shift without the coffee machine exploding. And yet, Dr. Vexthor observed, with what his species considered philosophical insight, you have somehow managed to optimize the entire galaxy's approach to workplace satisfaction, interspecies communication, and what quantum tells me you call not taking yourself too seriously. The Galactic Council's latest intelligence reports suggest that productivity across civilized space has increased by an average of 300% since your cultural influence began spreading, Quantum reported, consulting his datapad with obvious satisfaction. They're calling it the Jake effect, and have established an entire department dedicated to studying what they term weaponized helpfulness. Jake's laptop chimed with another incoming video call, this one from what appeared to be a very official-looking alien, in what he'd learned to recognize as expensive bureaucratic robes. Speaking of which, I've got a consultation call with the Supreme Administrative Council of the Andromedan Efficiency Bureau. Apparently their filing system hasn't been updated in 4,000 years, and they're experiencing what they're calling catastrophic organizational dysfunction. Will you help them? Dr. Vexthor asked, though they all knew the answer. Duck. They asked nicely. They offered to pay me in something called crystallized time, which sounds both impossible and awesome. And honestly, 4,000 years of bad filing systems sounds like exactly the kind of challenge that would drive me crazy if I didn't at least try to fix it. Jake grinned, accepting the video call as his laptop screen filled with the image of aliens who looked like they desperately needed someone to explain the concept of alphabetical order. As Jake began his latest consultation, enthusiastically diving into the Andromedan filing crisis with the same energy he'd once applied to fixing broken printers, Dr. Vexthor and Quantum exchanged what might have been knowing looks. You know, Dr. Vexthor murmured quietly, when we first abducted him, I thought we were studying human behavior. And now, Quantum whispered back, now I think human behavior was studying us. From the kitchen, Jake's voice carried over the sound of intergalactic diplomacy and efficiency consulting. Okay, Supreme Administrator Zixvaldor, I'm looking at your organizational chart here, and I've got to ask, who thought it was a good idea to file catastrophic system failures under miscellaneous paperwork subsection Q, because we need to have a serious conversation about categorization standards. Outside, Denver continued its normal daily routine, blissfully unaware that humanity had accidentally become the galaxy's premier customer service provider. In the basement, alien technology hummed quietly, occasionally improving itself based on Jake's offhand suggestions about energy efficiency. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, civilizations that had stagnated for millennia were discovering the revolutionary concept of actually enjoying their jobs. The Galactic Council had been right about one thing. Humans were definitely a containment breach waiting to happen. They'd just been wrong about what exactly was being contained. It wasn't human aggression or violence that threatened the established order of galactic civilization. It was human enthusiasm for making things work better, one optimization at a time. Jake's consultation continued in the background, his voice cheerfully dismantling 4,000 years of bureaucratic dysfunction with the casual confidence of someone who'd once convinced an entire office building that installing a slide between floors was a legitimate productivity improvement. And in the end, that might have been the most terrifying thing about humans after all. Their absolute unstoppable commitment to helping, whether the galaxy wanted it or not.